So let me officially welcome back. So we have Holly Weberg, who spoke about 2 weeks ago. She's from Las Vegas, very exciting career in working on cruise ships, and now most recently working in Las Vegas with Caesars and working with their loyalty guests, taking them on, arranging cruises for them. And now she's consulting and keeping very busy. So Holly, we welcome you back. It's terrific to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then let's see, Lawrence Rapp, you're in, good to see you. You had a very distinguished career. And I know you presented your career, and now you're doing high-level consulting to the cruise industry. And we really value your input and your strategic evaluation of where we're heading as an industry. So welcome back, Larry. You're in North Carolina, right, today?
That's right. Beautiful Asheville.
Yes. And our student here again is from Asheville.
Yep.
So Emily, you talked to last time. I'm sure Emily will have a question for you today. Right, Emily?
I'm working on it.
She's working on it. Okay. I mentioned John Delaney is here again. And John was actually our very first speaker. And John wrote a chapter for our new cruise ship management book on small ship cruising. Most recently, he was president of Windstar Cruises. He's worked for several other large cruise lines. He is heavily into consulting. And John, I take it you're in the Washington State area today?
I am, Fred. I'm up in my house in the mountains, and it's not 63 and sunny here. We had about 10 inches of snow.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hey, well, at least you have the moisture. We need that.
Yeah.
Need that here. Great. So welcome. I did not see Ted. I expect him to join us today. Hey, Ted. It's always great to hear from you. And you did our classes for us at the University of Central Florida. Welcome back. You did a great class this year. And you talked about the Princess Medallion. So I think the gang's all here. Ryan from Disney had another commitment, so he won't join us. So we have the four. So what I'd like to do, guests, panelists, is to maybe talk about what are some updates today. Each day I read something new about the industry, and today in the Wall Street Journal, if you haven't seen it, it was a great article. I think of an article of optimism, but also challenge, particularly with the Centers for Disease Control. So you might want to talk about that. And so maybe we'll start with you, John. Just kind of give us what's happening today. What is your perspective of the cruise industry moving forward beyond COVID? And then we'll go to the other panel. So if you could take 3 to 4 or 5 minutes, as long as you need, and then we'll open it up for questions from the students. So John, thanks for being here.
Sounds great, Fred. So, you mentioned CDC. Clearly, they're playing a very pivotal role in the U.S.-based home, ships that are home based in the U.S. But the thing that struck me the most, and I thought that the industry would head this direction, is the number of cruise lines that are now requiring vaccinations for all passengers prior to embarkation, as well as crew. It started with some of the smaller cruise lines, including my former employer at Windstar, but just within the last few days, Norwegian just announced that they will do the same, that they'll require vaccinations. They're the first major cruise line to do this, and with all of them hoping to be able to resume cruising this summer as soon as June. Personally, and I've been on record, and I think I even mentioned this when I spoke to the class earlier, that I personally believe that's the right answer, because ports are not going to be nervous about ships visiting if they know everyone's been vaccinated. If there is an outbreak on a ship, the fellow passengers really aren't at risk. And what's interesting is that Carnival Corporation, Arnold Donald, just was quoted today as saying that they do not plan to require vaccinations, which I think is quite surprising. We'll see how long that will last. The other thing that's going on right now, because the CDC has not issued guidance, acceptable guidance, for ships that have a U.S. home port that sail out of and sail back into U.S. ports like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, et cetera. that there was a lot of discussion about moving those ships to a foreign port to home port. So that'll be interesting to see if that's the path that cruise lines pursue to get back in business. I will tell you that I talked to a few of my travel agent friends before this class today, and they're all feeling quite good about the second half of this year. Bookings are strong, and they're feeling especially good about 2022. There's just a huge amount of pent-up demand for people who love to cruise.
Nice.
That's a nice vote of confidence. I read, I guess in the article today in the Wall Street Journal said that bookings are about 90% of where they were, future bookings, 90% of where they were before the pandemic. So you can see people are, as you say, John, starting to make plans to travel.
Fred, it's a real vote of confidence in the industry by consumers. I mean, the one thing that I think has always been true about cruisers is they tend to trust the cruise lines that they sail with. They tend to believe that they will do the right thing and that they won't do things that are not safe. So I think that 90% is a good vote of confidence and shows that trust.
That's great. Thanks, John. So stand by. Hopefully we'll get you in before you have to leave. So Holly, do you want to add from your perspective, which is very unique. You've had great experience in the industry, working on ships, leading on ships, then coming on land. Any perspective from say the Las Vegas stance?
Well, certainly. Basing on what John had just said as well, guests do trust. They trust the cruise lines that they've traveled with. They feel like they've established a rapport with onboard guests, or with, onboard crews. So they come to trust that experience and enjoy that experience. And we have seen a resurgence of the loyalty guests booking first and foremost, and they have always been on the books. So as cruise lines have pushed back and said, oh, now we're delayed another month, or now we're delayed another month, and now we're delayed 3 months or 4 months, those guests have continually said, that's fine, but when you're ready, we're booked. And that's nice, because the guests that will be new to cruising guests, those will be the ones that will have to really establish a trust in getting back and feeling comfortable in traveling again in any mode of travel. But especially for the cruise industry. And I too reached out to some of the travel agents to get a pulse on what they believe is the norm coming forward. And the travel agents are thrilled. They're seeing very strong bookings in the cruise market for new to cruising passengers. So I thought that was interesting. So I think loyalty is a good piece to start with, because your guests, your core, keeping them in the loop on items, that's always important. And I have taken a couple of notes that I wanted to share a little bit here. Again, ability to sail from other markets. The cruise lines are very flexible. They're able to move around. I mean, given that there's port space, I think we talked in the class previously, you have to reserve that years in advance. So a cruise line can't just pull out and say, you know what, we're not going to go to Miami now, we're going to go to Spain. Okay, well, there has to be docking space, and a lot of that space is reserved years in advance. So there is a little bit of flexibility. Cruise lines can be very nimble, a lot more nimble than other industries. So that's in their favor. Europe, for example, some of those ports are open. Also, the larger cruise lines, where they can be extremely nimble and winning back new to cruising guests, are the fact that they own private islands. So the perception is that, the cruise line controls that island, they control the cleanliness of it, etc. So that works very well. There's a couple of images coming out from marketing teams now that are showing pictures of, let's say, an airline being cramped, and then it shows a gal on her balcony and just kind of relaxing and enjoying, and they're playing off of that, working remote. MGM, I highlighted MGM did a beautiful campaign here in Las Vegas, calling it was their work remote campaign. So if you want to work remote, come stay in one of our grand hotel rooms and we'll provide you fax, we'll provide you Wi-Fi, we'll provide you anything and everything to make you feel comfortable. Plus you'll have access to socially distanced pools and cabanas, et cetera, and all the facilities. Very, very effective campaign for MGM, and they're still seeing incremental lift from that year over year. So those are some of the things that I believe that the cruise industry will continue to suffer on as they move forward, and just staying ahead of the narrative. The operations team is starting to have a louder voice in that they are showing the industry what they are doing to be ahead of the curve. So I think that's some strengths that the cruise industry has moving forward.
That's great, Holly. Thank you for those insights. And we'll come back to you later. I want to hear about just Las Vegas in general, but we can do that later on in the discussion. Okay, Larry, can you tell us from your perspective and how do you see it today and going forward?
Yeah, actually, I just did a podcast this week on the very subject. I will send you a link to that. So if anybody wants to go into more depth, they'll be able to.
Thank you.
But basically, this whole COVID disaster has been an absolutely existential threat to the cruise industry. Carnival is probably the most solvent of all the major cruise lines. They have about 22 billion in capital reserves right now, but they are bleeding through that in excess of 2 billion a month. So within the next year, they have a very significant problem on their hands. So obviously, everyone wants to put ships in service and generate some cash flow as quickly as possible. And as John alluded to, the fact that we have vaccines now is making that possible. I think some of the lines are, making very apt decisions. There are some ships operating in the trans-Tasman bubble between Australia and New Zealand, some ships running out of Bermuda. Bermuda's done a great job of controlling the virus, and provided all the protocols are in place, those ships probably can operate without too great a risk. I've got more concern about companies like Seabourn that are opting to operate out of Greece. They were able to get administrative approval to do it, but Greece is in the midst of a really terrible resurgence of this virus. So I hope the cruise line will be able to get through it without too many problems, but it's not a risk that I would have recommended them to take. Going forward, you'll see more and more ships coming in. CDC is clearly afraid to take any stance on the cruise ships returning to operation from the US. But I think, again, as the percentage of vaccinated population increases, CDC will know that that risk becomes less and less, and will probably come to some reasonable accommodation with the cruise lines. And perhaps the third quarter of this year, we'll see ships running out of the US again. A worry to the cruise lines that they're not talking about is that we have seen so far the number of vaccinations increasing exponentially as more vaccine becomes available. But there is still a substantial group of people that are resisting the vaccine, and if that percentage of the population is too great, and we can't get something approaching herd immunity here, it will put future operations at greater risk. So I think all the cruise lines are kind of holding their breath on that score. And I personally wish the government would do more to incent people to get the vaccine. Going beyond that, I have a concern. Cruise lines are hungry for cash flow. As they come back into operation, I really hope they do not take the easy way out by minimizing costs and degrading the onboard product. I think that would be a terrible mistake. I'm sure most of them are wise enough to avoid that pitfall, but there will be a temptation, and some people may well follow that path. So that will be an interesting development going forward, just to watch and see what happens, what feedback they actually get from these first voyages. So that's a little overview from my perspective.
That's a great overview. And absolutely, you know, when we are able to sail, I think ships are going to want to put their best foot forward. I mean, that's going to be the key, because the spotlight obviously is going to be beyond the cruise, or beyond the cruise industry. So I hear what you're saying, and let's hope we do the right thing, right? Great, thanks, Larry. We'll come back. And our next panelist, so we're happy to have Ted Knight back. I assume, Ted, you're in your home in Orlando, and you're our expert on Alaska cruising and, you know, some challenges up there. So Ted, can you give us an update?
Absolutely. Thanks, Doc. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
You know, we keep hoping tomorrow's going to be a better day. And as we look to the challenges ahead, we try to minimize the effect. Today, we just had an announcement regarding Japan, you know, having issues getting air acceptability and so forth. So the ball just keeps on rolling, and we hope that we find an end to it soon. Our principals have been very focused on getting us back to service. We haven't canceled Alaska, July, and August yet. We keep hoping. A lot of talks going on. It is tremendously important to the Pacific Northwest community to operate those cruises this fall or this summer and fall. Massive amount of revenue involved. You know, they missed out on 2020. 2021 could be devastating to the small business owners up in Alaska, in the ports and the contractors and so forth. So we're hoping. It may be a false hope, but you know. But this is, at the end of this month, is kind of a drop dead time. Either we have an agreement where we can operate in there, and also Canada and New England. Canada and New England's the same thing, where we have an agreement where we can operate in those parts of the world, or we'll have to start moving ships to other parts of the world. So, you know, we're an international company, princess of the Corp family. We're more of an international, so we're a little bit more effective around the world than some of the domestics. You know, we'll probably end up moving some of the ships if we can't do Alaska. There's been a lot of discussions regarding the vaccines and so forth. We're such an international company that some of our employees that we're now staffing the ship with just can't get the vaccine in their home country. In some cases, depending on where they're from, it's against their religion to be vaccinated. So there's ongoing discussions as far as the viability of the vaccines. I think it's important to note that our European products under Corp have been operating successfully prior to the vaccine requirements by following strict guidelines of temperature control and everything. I think, I can't exactly, I want to say 200,000 passengers have worked through Europe, and of the 200,000, I think 19 tested positive total, and of that, no outbreaks. So, you know, you never say never, and we're constantly reviewing, and our leadership will make the decision. If there comes a time where we can vaccinate North America, then I'm sure they'll look at that. But, so we're going under very cautious guidelines. We're trying to rebuild for the summer and fall. We're focused mainly on third and fourth quarter and 2022. 2022 bookings are ahead of 20. Alaska will probably be sold out by the end of the summer completely, not just tours, but also cruises. We're going from a 4-ship cross the Gulf fleet to a 3-ship across the Gulf fleet. We Corp had over $2.2 billion in FCCs to assign, with a lot of that being part of our international package in Alaska. So there's a lot of bent up demand. Both Princess and Holland are seeing incredible bookings for 2022. The infrastructure in Alaska is small to begin with, 700 and some odd thousand people in the whole state, over half within 100 miles of Anchorage. So leaving 350,000 people spread out over the whole state. So the infrastructure is jammed to the max for 2022. So we're hopeful. We're hoping that we can save part of Alaska. We're hoping we can save Canada and New England for the Northeast and those suppliers. We'll be moving our focus shortly, fourth quarter. We're already focused on 2022, and for the growth there.
That's great. So that's, I think, encouraging to some extent, and hopefully, you'll be selling. I know Alaska's been devastated. Like some of the cruise lines have their own islands, which John had mentioned. Holland and Princess, you do have some of the lodges. Are you going to be able to fill those through airlines, air traffic, bringing them to your lodges and try to leverage that? And the trains?
Corporately, we've opened 3 lodges this summer up in Alaska, and we're offering land vacations in conjunction with Alaska Railroad to a couple of properties on Holland side, and then our Kenai Princess Lodge, which only has 88 rooms in it. So it's a small package for the summer. We're trying as much as possible to create revenue yield in Alaska for our partners. And one thing I mentioned on an earlier talk, Alaska's personal for a lot of our company. We've been there a long time business relationships with our partners up there. We're doing everything that we possibly can to create business for our partners up in Alaska. So we will have, airline will be a challenge. It already is a challenge. The tours are priced fairly high. It shows the value of a cruise tour because you can do a land this summer, but roughly the same price next summer. You can do a cruise tour, but the lands will fill up. There's not that much space, but Holland and Princess, we own the lodges. In Alaska, we own the Fairbanks Princess. We both have lodges in Delaney, McKinley, and surrounding areas, but only 3 are going to be open this summer. So we'll try and push as much into that as we can.
Okay, very interesting. All right, let's pause here and see if John, you had a question. Go ahead.
It's one important fact, just for perspective. As we talk about the CDC needing to come out with some guidance that the cruise lines can follow, and this was Arnold Donald, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is the CEO of Carnival Corporation, but he made used a statistic today that I imagine Larry would agree with. But once a ship decides it's going to sail, it takes 60 to 90 days to get manning in place, loading, all of the different things that need to happen. So, what's happening today is going to impact clearly July, August, September, and that's why it's so important some guidance to come out on this.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, John. At this point, students, how about some questions? So we got a great overview of what's happening. What's on your mind? Who's going to ask the first question of any of our panelists?
I have a question.
Okay, we have, good, hold on a second. So we have Emily, she's in the audience today. So Emily, do you want to ask the first question? Go right ahead.
Sure. So I know we've talked a lot, specifically about trends in terms of specifically COVID, But what other outside of that trends do you think are arising in the cruise industry? And to take it even further, how do we as students today prepare to handle those trends for when we might be entering this industry?
Good question. So some of the other trends beyond COVID. So when they enter the industry, they'll be ready.
Well, we're seeing on our side, on the Princess side, is we're seeing trending towards more unusual destinations. Prior to COVID, the exotic trades, the unusual places were booking fast and furious. We're seeing on our side a trend more away from the simple 7-day Caribbean into a longer product. Could be Panama Canal, could be South America, could be a number of things where we saw a trend of a massive movement of families from the Caribbean to Alaska. Alaska became a very popular destination for families. So we see a trend towards the more unusual moving forward, which is a great thing. Higher yields, higher opportunities. Caribbean's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. There's always going to be a bunch of ships down there. There's always going to be deals. But we're seeing, in our case, we're seeing trending towards the more unusual stuff.
Right.
I think that's right. And even within the more traditional ports of call, there's a lot of emphasis on providing unique experiences. It's not just your bus tour around town and a little spiel about when the cathedral was built. It's now much more individual experiences, kayaking, biking, hiking, in-home visits, people-to-people experiences, so that guests really get a sense that they visited the place. They haven't just gone through on a bus.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's kind of like the Airbnb local experience. So the cruise industry is going to try to position that for travel, to get to know the local community.
Small ship trends, destinations, again, getting into that destination, really getting to know that destination.
Yes.
Viking has a really great group going on, or a trip going on as well with their river cruises, really getting into unique ports that cruise ships can't quite, get into, and also getting ashore in those ports and meeting local people in the ports that are bringing people into their homes and hosting them. And where else do you get that? So,
and just a trend that I talked about a little bit when I spoke to the class before. Expedition cruising is booming right now. There's 39 ships that will either be delivered this year or on the books for next 2 years that are 300 passengers or less. 80% of those ships are for the expedition market. So one area that's certainly booming, and it's consistent with what a few of the other panelists spoke about in the exotic destinations. People are really pushing out further and further the places that they want to visit. And not just going back to the same places.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that was in your chapter. You talked about the small ship cruising. So there's some advantages, as you mentioned. Thanks, John.
can I ask a question real quickly with John? I know that you were in the small ship with Windstar, and one of the things that Windstar does very effectively are their charter business. Because of the size of the ship, there's attraction there. Do you see charter expanding more?
It's an excellent question. It's hard to predict right now because there might be some lingering resistance because of COVID. Although a lot of folks do think, Holly, that small ship cruising is well positioned to recover maybe a little bit more quickly. So maybe that will be considered a safer choice. I think that's going to be a TBD, just to see the willingness. I think the core, a lot of the people who charter every year, the Go-Hagens and some of the other well-known charter companies, they'll be back, and that won't go down. The question will be, will there be new entrants to the charter market? Because that's a really important pipeline.
Gotcha.
That's a great question, great answer. And I think maybe the charters can be a little more nimble. I can even look at events. where you take a group of doctors or, professionals out on a charter, very safe, very controlled, almost a bubble, and do some events, open up events again. Or Holly, maybe you'd have a group that might want to go out somewhere on a charter. So yeah, I think they're fairly nimble. I also think that you think about the ports of Florida. Now, you probably know the number. So you have, of course, Miami's the large, Fort Lauderdale, Port Canaveral, Tampa, I guess those, Jacksonville. They probably make up maybe 60, 70% of all of the traffic coming out of the US into the Caribbean. Of course, Seattle, the West Coast ports. And no ships have been able to leave a US port, correct, since the pandemic. To think about that. They're not able to go out of a US port at this point. Think about all the employees, people traveling to a night before to get on the ship, staying in hotels, dining out, extending their vacation. All of that has been lost. And that's why you hear that the ships are just going to, reposition and go into the Caribbean, go to different ports in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, in Jamaica, et cetera, many others. So hopefully the CDC will, take a stand and support the cruise industry. That just, as you said, they've been very reluctant to grant sailing, and every day I look for that, and hopefully they'll make a decision soon. So great, thank you. Student questions. Go ahead, Ted. Sorry.
One thing I want to say about that, never in the history of our industry has the industry been more in tune with each other, working together to get past this point of COVID. We look at logistics and we listen and we learn, and we learn from our own corporation. We learn from others. Some of the ships are going to be home ported in some of these other countries. There's so many factors to consider. Can they get gas? Can they get fuel in those countries? If not, where can they buy the fuel? Can they get air seats? If they can't get air, can they charter? What's the charter going to cost? Is it $300,000 for the plane, $500,000 for the plane? What's it going to cost for the charter? So all these things are factored in before they decide to move something to another country. So we can only hope that we can open up our doors again so all that money can be funded domestically instead of internationally.
Ted, question for you, talking about the CDC and the interaction, what have you. I've heard that you're in Orlando, so that's why it reminded me. Governor DeSantis had a meeting, I think last week, with very, very key people from the current cruise lines. And that meeting seemed very successful in moving forward as a cruise line. Were you able to participate in that, or can you comment on that more from a local side, because you were right there?
I did. In fact, there was a follow-up to that meeting yesterday, and it's an interesting. DeSantis is trying to get the ports open, so he's doing everything. He announced today that he was going to file suit against the CDC and so forth. And I hope he does. I hope that this along with other, we got to remember it's a full scale attack here. It's the cruise industry, it's the legislations, it's the union workers, the contractors. All these people are trying to convince the CDC to bring back domestic cruising for the economic reasons, and we'll go by whatever rules. Just tell us the rules, we'll go by the rules, right? So, and it's what's challenging for DeSantis is important to remember that if our former President Trump, who was screaming at the CDC, couldn't convince them to change their ways, does Governor DeSantis think that they're going to listen to him? So that's just a way to look at it. I think more pressure needs to be brought from the industry, the locals, the Congress, and so forth. There has to be a better understanding of the cost of these closures to the local communities, more so than just a Florida governor standing on a pulpit and screaming. God bless them. We appreciate it, but you know what I mean? There has to be more pressure brought from New York, from the Washington State, from California. There has to be a national pressure brought on CDC to make a difference.
Mhm. Got it.
So we appreciate Governor DeSantis and what he's trying to do. It will just be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Mhm. It seemed like it was a good meeting, though. It brought a lot of great people together, and I've heard a lot of chat and discussions in LinkedIn and Facebook groups.
Very positive. And you know, again, we have a champion fighting for the industry. With all the businesses in South Florida affected, you know, with Port Canaveral and of course Tampa. So yeah, it's nice to have someone out there challenging, champion for us. Now we just need to get others in that same arena and have us all fight together.
All right. Other questions, students? Okay. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you guys think with everything going on with COVID, if the vaccine is going to be something the CDC is going to require for the next year and a half until we have a solid solution.
My personal feeling is yes. I just don't know when they're going to announce that. And that's just my pure personal feeling about it based on what Norwegian has just done and the number of other cruise lines have announced. I think that is going to become the norm.
Yeah,
I think it will certainly be part of whatever solution is ultimately found with the CDC. No question.
I agree completely. I think that it's going to be a part of the future, providing we can get the vaccine to the workers from around the world. But I do see it as a solution for tomorrow.
You know, it's also, it's not unprecedented. There are certain parts of the world where you need to have a vaccine for like yellow fever, for example, before you can enter that country or travel to that part of the world. So there is some precedent for it on a localized basis.
Well, frankly, I'm of an age where at one time you didn't travel without your passport and your yellow book that showed all of your smallpox and yellow fever and etc. vaccinations. It was just part of how you traveled. And it's not, at least to me, it's not some shocking innovation here that should come about.
And I think we look at it from our perspective in North America, but from a worldwide, what we've heard, what corporates heard from different countries, is access to the vaccine has been very slow, and so they're trying to do as much as they can, as quick as they can, while they go through the process of vaccination. In the future, I can't imagine it not being required, which is going to be interesting, because as I sit here with this magic little phone right here in front of me, I'm reminded that we're trying to get our adult kids to go back to vaccinate themselves, and they're pushing back. It's a generational thing, so it will be interesting to see. But eventually, I just can't imagine it not being required.
That's great. John, I know we've only got a few minutes, so we'll give you the floor. Can you, again, from your perspective, look at career tracks again for our students graduating from the hotel and restaurant school here at Northern Arizona? Any advice, opportunities for them coming into the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I used this analogy, and when I spoke to the class before, I had a slide that showed a cruise ship, and it just made all the different public areas. And it just makes the very clear point that, you know, cruise ships are floating hotels. So it is no different to think about a career in the cruise industry than it is to think about a career in the hotel industry and the restaurant industry. Partnerships are becoming more and more common. Almost every cruise line has a culinary partnership, be it Guy Fieri or Thomas Keller for Seabourn, or various different chefs. So as you're thinking about it, the industry is booming. I talked about it will be booming as soon as they can sail again, but the number of new ships coming out is just enormous. I mean, the capacity is going to really grow over the next 5 years, and the industry is going to need new leaders. It's going to need new hospitality professionals. So I would encourage you guys to think about it. It's a terrific way to see the world while you get some great experience, relevant experience that you may take at some point ashore.
That's great. Thanks for the words of encouragement, and students, get ready. And with your work experience in hotels and restaurants that you have to complete, your summer work, I think you'd be well positioned in a career in the cruise industry. And as John said, the cruise industry is going to need your talents as it expands. And we talked about new ships being built. Our module 8 looked at the trends. And so very exciting. And as John says, see the world. Great. Well, thanks, John. I'll thank you. I know you have another appointment, but we're really grateful for you joining us again, and I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Fred. My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Take
so
See you,
much.
John. Cheers.
Great. So for the remaining 3 panelists, any other questions from any of our students you want to ask? Maybe careers, trends, insights? Anybody? All right. Our students are pretty quiet today, so that's okay. Maybe think of one, put something in the chat. Put something in the chat, and I'll be happy to ask it. So my question for the 3 panelists, I'm always interested in what's next. I love cruising. I can't wait to get on a ship again. Of course, I have my two shots, Moderna shots, so I feel pretty good, but still cautious. We still have to wear our masks. And but at any rate, looking forward to cruising again. So I'm always interested in what's going to be some of the innovations. We had talked in the class where you get to spend an extra night at a port where, like in Venice, one of the celebrity cruises, I know you get to stay an extra night, come in and then have a night. I love that. Most of the places, you're pretty much in and out for the day, but having that extra night to explore a city that you might not have had time for. So that's one thing I hope to see more of as a trend. The other thing would be just new, exciting destinations around the world. Any insights on where cruise companies might be looking for some really interesting international cruises that might appeal to cruisers from the United States in particular. So I'll just stop there and ask any insights on any of those 2 items.
Well, I would say, looking at it from the cruise point of view, we've seen a tremendous change in our industry. The technology side, on the Cunard side, we have the Queen Mary 2. She's an ocean-going vessel. She's an actual ocean liner. She's deep, she's fast, and she can cross mass oceans at a given time. So cruise ships, the technology, the engineering is changing quickly, which will allow us to go further, faster, open up more ports, more opportunities. 15 years ago, we could not do a 7-day cruise and touch South America. Now cruise lines can do a 7-day cruise and touch South America because of the technology. So more and more ports will open up more and more opportunities. One of the things we have heard from our past passengers is they like more time in port. They like more nights in port. It's a little bit complicated from us on the industrial side because of the rents we pay and the contracts that we have, but it's not impossible. So they're always looking for extending the time to increase the guest, expectations. So we're looking. Not too many places can you move a 100,000-ton ship to without some kind of infrastructure. So Caribbean will be challenging, but there are other areas. Parts of South America will open up. West coast of Mexico, not so much, but on the western side over there, maybe into South America possibly. Bermuda will not grow. They're very strict on the number of people they allow in there per week. So really, we're focused on moving southwest, not a whole lot of places to go east out of Florida. So, we're looking, we have ideas. We'll see if we can put together the package that would make it attractive.
That's the, now, are there any ships that go to the Easter Islands, Chile, for example?
Go ahead, Holly.
Yes, absolutely. I've been on those ships actually.
Oh, great,
I
good.
come from Crystal Cruises, and so we used to sail there regularly. During our world cruises, we would hit there at least annually. And some of the smaller ships are also able to pull in there. Really, really unique opportunities and experiences down there. Something I was listening for and hoping Ted might have some insight on it, although maybe it's past his time frame because it was a couple of years ago now, and he's very, very focused on trends and what's moving forward. But the Port of Ireland gave up some of their Navy ports to develop as tourist ports. Have those been of interest to your cruise lines?
From what I understand, that's an operational side. We don't get to talk to them very much. They're kind of in their own little world. But from what I understand, there is a bidding war going on between Princess P&O and other family members for those spots. Yes.
Okay.
Apparently there is a tremendous amount of interest in them and how they can it's new, it's different. Other opportunities, it'd be like opening up Bermuda. Oh, wow, look at this. We can go do this. This is different. So, yeah, but from what I understand, there is a bidding war going on. And, I'll trade you 2 Mediterraneans for 1 Irish coast.
Okay.
That's funny. That's
Interesting.
a great question. Yeah, beautiful country. Also, Australia we've talked about, more cruises like going around Australia. So, maybe starting in Perth and coming, let's see, what direction would that be? West, east, coming, say, to Melbourne and then to Sydney and then up to the Great Barrier Reef. Kind of circumnavigate as best you can Australia. I mean, there's so much to see. Most of the big cities are called the Necklace, right on the coast. Fascinating. You don't see too many of those cruises. Same with New Zealand. I've been around New Zealand a dozen times, but it'd be nice to see other stops. I love Dusky Sound and all the ones you go into, and it's fascinating. But also seeing other parts of New Zealand. Africa would be another place, for more cruises as it gets safe.
I think we'll see, Doc Fred, I think we'll see some growth out of Australia. We normally have 4 ships in Australia and a couple that go visit down there during the season. Australia and New Zealand has been very, very popular for us. All of Indonesia has sold well and been very popular for people, especially for the more experienced. I do see opportunities. We have an Australia cruise, plus we have a land package for Australia. Every year that sells out. We do see a massive amount of growth in that area.
When you get beyond the East Coast, the ports are rather few and far between, and those that are available are generally available only to smaller ships. So I think when you talk about circling Australia, it's going to remain a small ship destination for quite a long time.
That's great insight, Larry. Thank you for that. Other places you might think might be some new and you don't see many cruises like around India, like going from the southern tip up to some of the biggest cities. I know there's a cruise from Dubai to India, which I always thought would be fascinating to do myself. I'd love to do that. Do you see more in India or?
Those tend to be positioning cruises, ships going from the Mediterranean around to Singapore, up into Indonesia, Southeast Asia. Those are the areas that are the hot destinations. And yes, we stop at India on the way past because it's there, but the ports just don't have the sizzle and the guest demand that the ports that are farther east do.
Now that we have an airlift issue going into some of those ports too.
Correct.
As far as because we have to turn shipboard personnel in some of the ports, and it's difficult to get air into some of those cities.
That's a really good perspective. Really, Ted, good to hear that perspective. I can understand that. But, down the road, maybe there's some good opportunities for improvement. Look what China has done with their airports, some of the best in the world, right? And they're have the biggest population, although India, they say, will overtake it in the years.
And I've got to say, one of the things I think is really a missed jewel that I think would really help the industry would be to do away with the Passenger Service Act, allow us to have more U.S. destinations in an itinerary. I think ships that would originate, if we could do scheduled service from Canada, Bar Harbor, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Norfolk, if we could run those scheduled service continuously, I think it would be nice to see a beef up of U.S. ports, and not so focused on moving the ships around the world. I think we could do so much better for the industry if we could focus domestically.
Yeah, I like that point. And you think now Greenland, right? Who would have thought? But Greenland has become kind of an interesting destination, and it's not very far, certainly doable from Boston, Canada, right? And
we can get air to Iceland. So Iceland could eventually be some kind of a hub for something. We can get air to Iceland.
Sure, Reykjavik. Great. Any other questions, students? I saw one in the chat.
Yeah, I think they might be gone now.
Might be
since
gone.
We
left.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had, on our end, I have to apologize. We lost our internet twice. And when we came on, it was great to hear all of you talking, so that's great. I apologize for that. I guess our internet here, according to Emily, has been a little unstable on campus the last day or so. But we're back. I'm glad you stuck to it. So got a few more.
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Willie.
So we've seen, up to COVID, it seems like ships are getting bigger and bigger, and we're building them to hold more and more people. Do you think, in light of recent events, and I've seen a few articles and different things talking about how people are kind of enjoying the more space they can get these days, do you think that we could see maybe ships being built in the future that aren't quite as big, and then maybe, so something that's not small enough where you got to double your prices necessarily, but is there any sort of give that we might see in the future on ship size compared to what's going on, just to have fewer people on a boat, but still have the same amenities you would get on the larger scale boats?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's a very difficult answer from a corporate point of view. 20 years ago, we were not all publicly held companies. We were privately held companies, and we could kind of share our vision with our employees and go forth and build what we thought was appropriate. And that's exactly how the Queen Mary 2 was built, was because the chairman had a vision for what an ocean liner could be. So he ended up paying roughly twice the amount of money for that ship that he would have otherwise. Nowadays, publicly held companies, you have to take into consideration of a ship, how many beds it is, and how long it can pay for itself. Small ship cruise is never going to go away. In fact, it will be growing, I'm sure. The old Renaissance ships keep turning names and moving around the industry, but they're great ships, hold 800 passengers. Engines have to be refitted. They have to be repainted. There's certain things that they have to do to upgrade them, but those are going to always be popular. The smaller the ship, the more you have to charge for the bed, because if a ship's going to cost you $1 billion and you have, let's say, 2,000 beds as compared to 1,000 beds, and every cruise line has a different market they reach. Carnival and Royal Caribbean they have very large ships. They reach the Caribbean market, which has a lot of people. We're kind of more exotic trade and some of the other trades. So we have ships that have fewer people. We'll carry 1,000 people less than our ships on the same size as our competitors do. So people like the nuances of the big ships. They don't like waiting in line. They don't like to feel like a herd of cattle. They like to feel like they're special. So we developed the program, the medallion program, for that. But yeah, I think, to shorten it up, because so others can speak, I think we'll see a growth in small ship travel. I think it'll be a very lucrative side of the business. And the uncruise in Alaska, all these small companies are doing very, very well, and they'll continue to do well. You know, National Geographic, Nat Geo, all these are great companies, you know. But when it comes to a corporate viewpoint, basically you got to have enough beds to pay for itself.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great answer in terms of the volume you need when you're building $1 billion ship. And I think the small cruise, you're going to see the yachts like Ritz-Carlton coming. So smaller ship, very expensive. But yeah, I agree. Good. And other questions, students?
I've got a recent article about, was it a couple days ago? Disney postponed or kept pushing back their cruise ships. Do you think that they're going to kind of be the outlier in the industry? They seem to be so far. Most other people seem to be holding to, coming back in June and July, or at least starting. So do you think that they're kind of going to be the outlier in what's going on, or are more people going to try and push back their ships until the CDC comes out with something more firm?
Well, from I'm sorry, I don't, from our perspective, because so many of our destinations require air, we have to make decisions earlier than some of the others do. Because if we can't get the air, or if the air is an issue, we have to decide early. You know, your drive up market, which Disney and Carnival is out of Port Canaveral, they can kind of go with the flow and make changes according to what they view is on the horizon. For us and some of the other brands, we're driven by air availability and accessibility, and how far can we push it before, you know, we know we're going to have to cancel because the air is just not confirming the way, you know, we're not seeing confirmation from the airline that they're going to offer the flights that we have booked. So, you know, Disney's a drive up market. So we'll see. They would adjust quickly. It's unlike us, you know, that Disney has the ability for one or two people to make that decision. It'll happen tomorrow.
Great. Very good. Very good. Great questions. Anybody else? We're almost out of time. We've been on for about an hour. So I guess I'll turn it back to our three remaining panelists, Larry, Holly, and Ted. Do you want to just kind of give us a 1 minute kind of perspective for our students in terms of the future and cruising? And then we'll thank you and move on to our next class. So why don't we start with, can we start with you, Larry? Just how do you see, are you bullish on the cruise industry? Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, if you listen to all of the conference calls that the big corporations have had, it's clear there is so much pent-up demand and at price levels that are at or above anything the industry was experiencing before this pandemic. As we get our hands around this, and I think we're all bullish on the fact that that will happen, whether it's second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, once the floodgates open, the cruise industry is going to come back very, very strongly. And some corporations like Carnival that have managed to shed some of their less efficient ships are going to come back with even better margins than they had before. So for an investor, I think it's a great time to be in cruise. For a prospective employee, set your sights on it, get your experience, and look forward to it coming back strong.
That's great. Very, very encouraging. Let's see, Ted, we'll go, and then we'll go to Holly after you, Ted.
Well, I see nothing but blue skies on the horizon, you know, with the amount of FCCs we have and people wanting to cruise. And for a career in this business, it's important that, you know, if this is the career that you decide you want to get onto the wholesale side, retailer side, look and see where the opportunities are. You know, when you're out of college, check with tour companies, see what's available, become a rep for most of the reps that are in our industry now started at smaller companies, kind of worked their way up into the larger companies. There will be many opportunities. As this rebounds, the strong will get stronger, the pocket will get deeper, and more opportunities will be out there. So good luck to you. And I hope to see you down the road on the street again.
That's great, Ted. Hopefully we can do a Princess Cruise and you'll come along with the student group. We'd love to have you. There was one question in the chat real quick. The student, I think it was Julie, asked, we're going to see more shorter cruises, like 2 to 3 day cruises, do you think?
I think so.
That was the
I think
question.
so initially, because some of the bigger lines are trying to win back the comfort of the travelers. And so they're running 3 and 4 day out of Florida to their private islands. And
Right.
so we're already starting to see that.
Yeah, that makes sense, to kind of dip your toe in the water, so to speak, to get back. So that was a great question, Julie, and thanks, great answer. Holly will give you the final word. And I started out introducing you an hour ago. Said, how's Las Vegas starting to come back since you're there, real quick?
Vegas is resilient, not as resilient as the cruise industry is. It's a nice place to be. For us, it's a 10 steps forward and 3 back, but we're moving forward. So that's the main thing. Yes, there is a lot of growth and opportunity that we're seeing. In my specific area where I work now, it's kind of a different role for me to be in a marketing function where I'm working business to business with the cruise lines and some of the high rollers. As I shared with the class, we sailed 32,000 high rollers last year with Norwegian Cruise Line, 2019, with Norwegian Cruise Line, who was our partner with Caesars Entertainment. And those guests are ready to go again. They don't care where we're cruising, they want to go. So that's very encouraging to me to see that. Caesars as a corporation has taken some caution where they're not interested in promoting travel per se right now. They want to wait and see and make sure everybody's safe and what have you. And our partners are aware of that. So that's something we look at. For my own interest, I'm also watching the Japanese Olympics, which start in July. Generally, cruise lines are used as extra hotel space. When the Olympics are held in a port city, the cruise lines are usually off the coast and used to help house whatever extra space is needed because the city may not have enough hotel rooms. And so with Japan coming out recently and saying that non-essential participants with the Olympics are not going to be included, it'll be interesting to see if the cruise lines will be used for that, because maybe the overflow of housing will not be needed. I'm not certain. So, so that's something I'm watching for July.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And since they're not going to open the Olympics to people outside of Japan other than the athletes,
even the athletes' families, for example, media, excess media. No, you have to be essential to the event. And that says a lot about how global nations are affected and how they're looking at this. And so it'll be interesting to see. And as you may recall, many years ago, many months ago, that was the highlight of the media, was the cruise ship in Japan. And I think Japan is aware of their history there. So
yeah, that's the Diamond Princess, unfortunately. Yeah, I've been on that ship. And we talked about the Netflix, the final cruise, I think it was called, the last cruise. I'm glad it was only an hour long and not a 10-part series on Netflix. But thanks for that insight, Holly. And, we wish you well. I know we'll stay in touch. And of course, Larry, for all your great expertise and experiences, I hope you're keeping busy and consulting. I know you're a very valuable resource to our industry and to our students. We're so fortunate to have had you in class. And our friend Ted Knight, with Princess down in Orlando. Ted, good luck with Alaska and with Princess, and we're excited. We're all excited to sail again. So we'll hope for the best. We'll remain optimistic. This class has been great, keeping current. It's been a very exciting time to learn about the cruise industry, I think. So we thank, and John, of course, had to leave. We thank John Delaney. So students, we can give our special guest, our panelists, a hand, a virtual hand. And again, I thank you so much for your participation, panelists. Just a great job. You're a great asset and friend to our students, the future leaders in the cruise industry. And I know they'll remember you for a long, long time, and hopefully your paths will cross one day. So thank you again.